The wedding date with my boyfriend of 3 years is approaching. However, I found many text messages in his phone. Word by word, they were all sent by him to another girl. I'm getting married. Regret it? I'm happier than you. Until the night before our engagement, he finally sent her 4 text messages. Fine, you really have guts. Don't be stubborn with me, okay? The wedding date is set, and the wedding dress is ordered. As long as you come back, you can be the bride. On the day Wendy returned to China, it was my birthday. A group of people were celebrating my birthday and giving birthday wishes when she pushed the door and entered. The woman was wearing a lamb wool coat and had long, curly hair. She walked up to us in 2 or 3 steps in high heels, raised her hand and directly splashed the water from the teapot in front of her on my face. After splashing, she folded her arms and smiled. She said to the man sitting beside me, "This is the kind of person you're dating? Such bad taste." The box was silent. The originally lively sounds disappeared completely. She raised her face and smiled arrogantly, as if she was certain that the man beside me would spoil her as he used to. After a long silence, as if a lifetime had passed, Ryan took a few napkins and wiped the tea stains on my cheek gently. He held my face, his gaze serious and gentle, as if only I could fit in his eyes. Really? I think I have good taste. Miss Wendy, next week is my wedding with Annie. I hope you can attend. As if unable to believe these were words that could come out of his mouth, the woman took a step back and left in a huff by slamming the door. But after she left, no one in the hall dared to make a sound. Ryan lowered his eyes and still gently wiped the tea leaves on my face clean. But while wiping, he raised his hand and suddenly smashed the priceless teacup on the table, accompanied by a loud cracking sound. He still smiled brightly, looking around at everyone present, including me. With slightly raised thin lips, he said softly, "All of you, get out, okay?" If time went back 4 years, everyone would think that the person Ryan was going to marry was Wendy. He, who has always been cold and unfeeling, would run across most of the city to buy flowers for Wendy. He, who doesn't like socializing, is willing to deal with people from the entire art circle for Wendy. Even for every exhibition of Wendy, he can push aside important meetings and be personally present every time. Friends around him always teased, President Ryan can also blossom like an iron tree. But the ending of the 2 of them was not good. So much so that Ryan hated Wendy deeply. So much so that Wendy didn't come back for 4 years after going abroad. Instead, I took advantage of the opportunity. Everyone knows that the person Wendy disliked the most during her student days was me. I still remember that night when one of his friends was drunk and pointed at me and said, "He wants to marry me purely to anger Wendy." It has cooled down these days, and Ryan comes back later and later. But I can't ask him for anything in any way, even though we are about to get married. Ryan repaid my loan. Ryan paid my tuition. My life was saved by Ryan. So I don't even have the right to resist even a little bit. When I was staring at the food on the table and considering whether to heat it up in the microwave again, Ryan came back. He casually hung his suit on the clothes hanger at the door. He leaned down a little and smiled at me. "Help me take off my tie, wife." His tone was both flirtatious and natural, as if the person who was furious because of Wendy's appearance yesterday wasn't him. As if the person who chuckled and told me to get out wasn't him either. I walked up to him and looked up to study the structure of his tie. I knew he was looking down at me, and his gaze was as dazzling as the light, until he raised his hand and caught my wrist. He whispered in my ear, "Stupid. After becoming an adult, I have only done such things with Ryan. He is always unhurried." This time, however, he stopped when he touched the scar on my back. Both he and I know very well how this scar came about. It was Wendy who cut it with a utility knife, one stroke at a time. When I was in school, I had a friend who was envied by everyone. That was Ryan. Perhaps at that time, the concept of class divided us. As a poor student like me, there is a world of difference between Ryan and Wendy's circle and me. They are a group of people that even teachers can't control. Fighting and brawling are always covered by someone. Every day, a group of people rush to curry favor with them. It is under such circumstances. Ryan is very close to me, who can't even afford the steamed buns in the school cafeteria for 3 meals. I think during that time, Ryan really regarded me as a friend. He gave me his unused textbooks, left his meal card with me for me to eat, eagerly discussed the questions in the exercise book with me. At that time, I was bullied by a group of girls. He stood in front of me. He said, "I am his person. Don't bully me anymore. Everything was quite beautiful before this, right?" He was my salvation, until one day. He told me that he had a girl he liked. It was Wendy. It was the girl who bullied me at the beginning. She is quite charming. She is stubborn enough. I like it. This is his evaluation of Wendy. Until that moment, I realized that he had never regarded me as a person either. That night he took me to drink. Wendy called a group of people and trapped me in the bathroom. Using a utility knife, she carved on my back again and again. I still remember her face, delicate and perfect, like a ghost from hell. She said that she hated people like me who bully others relying on powerful connections the most. Have you taken your medicine on time? I think your mental state is much better than before. In the hospital on Wednesday, the sun shines through that thin window and falls on the old desktop in the consulting room. The doctor looks at me through his glasses. "Miss Annie, you are going to get married, right? Don't you plan to let your husband know that you have such a condition?" On the case report placed on the desktop are the words that I am suffering from depression. Severe depression seems to have been with me since junior high school. My dad said I was being melodramatic and just wasting the family's money. It was mild at that time, but for some reason these years, it has become more and more serious. I can't sleep all night. Loss of appetite. Whenever I see sharp things, I always want to bump into them. I have never felt emotions like happiness and joy. Generally speaking, the company and encouragement of a partner can alleviate the symptoms. So I still suggest you tell your husband. Under the table, my hand gradually tightens my case report. Tell Ryan? What expression will he have when he knows? Probably give me some money and let me treat the disease? Ryan always hooks the corner of my eye and says he likes the way I smile. So I disguise myself in front of him with a smile. He probably doesn't want to know. In fact, I am just a dejected ghost. I folded the case report, put it in my bag and then went home. Ryan won't come back so early, so I have plenty of time to cook. I have hidden the fact that I have depression very well. In fact, sometimes I think it's not that I hide it well. But Ryan has never really looked at me seriously. To be fair, he is very kind to me. But many things are just superficial. I think, for him, I am an acceptable person. Because I have known him for a long time, because I am obedient, I am docile, and I come and go as he calls. The crazy love in his eyes has never fallen on me. Sorry, wife. The meeting was delayed. Are you hungry? The man enters the door, takes off his coat and hangs it on the hanger. These days he has gradually changed his address and called me wife because our wedding date is indeed approaching. I have prepared the meals. Under the soft light, I look at him. I open my mouth several times but can't say a word. He raises his eyebrows and walks in front of me, bends down and naturally unties the apron strap around me and softens his tone. What's wrong? So wronged? Ryan, I finally summon up the courage to show him the case. But at this moment, the cell phone in his pocket rings. The man answers it. I still remember clearly the sudden change in his expression that day. Coldness, sarcasm, loss of composure, and then collapse. I have seen such an expression before. I saw it on his face on the day Wendy announced that she was going abroad. The apron strap that was half untied is left untied. He suddenly turns around, picks up the coat hanging at the door, and takes the car keys. There is an urgent matter. I have to go out. I want to hook his sleeve, but I feel his momentary coldness. I know that he doesn't want to give me too many explanations anymore. The sound of the door closing separates me from him outside his door. At first, I thought something had happened in his company. But he didn't come back all night. I sent him messages, but he didn't reply. When I called him, he hung up directly. He was already slow in replying to my messages, but hanging up on me like this was a first. Later, it was his friend who couldn't stand it anymore. He told me that Wendy had attempted suicide but failed. He stayed by her bedside for 3 whole days and 3 nights. Wendy cut her wrist, but she didn't even cut the vein. There was just a thin bloodline. The doctor diagnosed her as having mild depression. These days, Ryan has been taking care of her. Wendy can't bear the ringing of the phone, so he hung up all calls. Wendy doesn't want him to talk to others, so he hasn't replied to any messages. When I arrived at the hospital, Wendy was huddled under the quilt. Without makeup, only a pair of apricot eyes were exposed. Her face was pale. When she saw me, she was like a wild animal that had been hit in a vital part. "Give Ryan back to me. Why on earth did you marry Ryan? You don't deserve him." She was hysterical. I took a few steps back. Just a few days ago, she was still radiant. But in just these few days, she has become like this. I opened my mouth, but for a moment I lost my voice and didn't know what to say. In the end, I didn't say anything and was pulled away by a man who burst into the ward, holding my wrist. Ryan's face didn't look good either. He was still wearing the blue shirt he wore when he left. In these 3 days, he probably hasn't had a good rest. I lowered my eyes and followed him. People in the hospital corridor were in a hurry. He pulled me to an unoccupied corner of the stairs before letting go. "Wendy has depression after coming back from abroad. That's why she said those things. It's not. Ryan, shall I give you back to her?" I interrupted him and said to him, looking up. He was stunned and asked me, "What did you say?" I said, "We won't get married. I'll give you back to her." Probably not expecting these words to come from me, Ryan was stunned and then held my wrist. "Okay, stop making trouble. Wendy has depression. She is sick. Don't argue with her, okay?" I lowered my head and was silent for a long time before I said that sentence. "But I have it too." He paused there and seemed to be amused by me in anger. "You also have depression? You love to laugh so much. How could you have depression? Stop making trouble, okay?" I was stunned and looked at him for a second or two. It seemed that something was choking my throat. My heart was immersed in a dull sourness. I just wanted to escape quickly and leave this place. So I turned around and walked towards the hospital exit. Ryan didn't chase after me. I took a taxi and drove to the old house at home. In fact, I really seldom go home. Even for my marriage, I just told my dad on the phone. He didn't care. He said he didn't want to attend my wedding and said that he would let my mom attend. But since I was a child, I have been looking for my mom. That woman can't come back to the country a few times a year. It is said that the old house in my hometown is going to be demolished and a lot of demolition compensation can be obtained. But my dad is even vigilant when I ask about it because he is going to give all this demolition compensation to his youngest daughter. The youngest daughter he had with another aunt. Passing through the slightly messy small yard, I pressed the doorbell. A man came running to open the door. "Stella, you're home. Are you tired? Have you studied hard?" The man's doting smile froze on his face when he saw me, and then he changed his tone. "Why are you here?" I squeezed into the house through the extremely small crack in the door. He always thinks that I am coveting his property and is reluctant to let me enter the house. I looked around at the home furnishings here. There were some photos hanging on the wall. My dad, an aunt, and a girl smiling at the camera. This is a family. There is no me. "Hey, sister, you're back." The door was opened again, and a girl in high school uniform walked into the room. My dad immediately changed his expression and asked her if she was tired with concern. The girl didn't seem to want to pay any attention to him and walked straight into the room. My dad gave me a stern look. "I tell you, Stella is in a crucial period of senior 3. Don't disturb her for no reason. I'm just afraid that her mood will be infected by you who are always so gloomy." I nodded, lowered my eyes, and tried to make myself smile, but the curvature of the corner of my mouth was probably not very good. Dad, my illness seems to have worsened. The doctor prescribed more medicine for me. Sometimes I even have hallucinations. I wanted to organize my words and say something more, but he had already interrupted me. What illness do you have? You are just being pretentious. What kind of bullshit depression? It's just that you are not strong enough. You don't have resilience. Today's medicine is really, arbitrarily giving people some titles. It's all about making money. So all my words were swallowed back into my throat and I didn't know where to start. Every word and sentence that follows becomes extremely difficult. Dad, I don't want to get married anymore. Sure enough, he flew into a rage and then sneered and laughed at me. What? Heh, I knew it was you. You've been like this since childhood, extremely sentimental. This time, you must have made the man angry. He dumped you, right? I'm telling you, control your temper. With you like this, who would want you? I don't know how long I was silent. For a very long time. Until tinnitus started again. Until my eyes began to moisten. His taunting voice came from above. Still crying. Still crying. How old are you and still crying? What depression? You're just too cowardly. Be strong. Don't you understand this simple truth? The endless humming only ended when another female voice interrupted. Oh, Annie, you're back. Annie's dad, why are you scolding the child? Annie, do you want to stay for dinner? It's the woman my dad recently married. She smiled apologetically at me and asked me, Annie, do you want to stay for dinner? But there are only 3 sets of bowls and chopsticks on the table. After holding my breath for a long time, I shook my head. Stepping out of the house and into the night. It seems that starting from these few days, the temperature drops particularly severely at night. I wrapped my clothes tighter and stared at the flowing traffic. It seemed that in an instant, that string of silver lines converged into a wild beast and pounced on me. I know. It's always like this. I start having auditory hallucinations again. I hear my dad say, you're just not strong enough. I hear my former classmates say, she's just too cowardly. If it were me, I would have resisted long ago. I hear Ryan say, you love to smile so much. How could you have depression? A black Maybach stops in front of me. The man rolls down the car window. Leaning on the steering wheel, his deep eyes look at me. Why are you crying? Come home with me, huh? After a long while, I realize that this is not an illusion. It's Ryan. He really appears in front of me. I don't understand how he found me. I thought he was still with Wendy. He can't leave Wendy alone. In the night, his eyes are like a dark pool that pulls people in deeply. As if telling me that he is determined to have me. I can never escape. But, what choice do I have? I look back at the warm light shining from the building behind me. Dad tells me that I'm too sentimental and too willful. So, is it enough to just smile? Is it enough to just obey? Will that make me happy? I opened the car door and got in. The man leaned over and rubbed my head. Planted a kiss at the corner of my lips. Don't pretend to have depression anymore, huh? Next time, I won't have the patience to coax you. Ryan seems to be even nicer to me. He is so good to me that it even makes me a little unaccustomed. Before, all the matters of the wedding were handled by his subordinates. He didn't care about such things at all. But today, he wants to take me to choose a wedding dress. In the magnificent store, the layers of hanging wedding dresses are dazzling. Ryan sat on the sofa and casually chose several styles of wedding dresses. The prices I glimpsed could buy one of my dad's cars. With the help of the clerk, I put on a wedding dress, walked through the long corridor, and came in front of the man. He leaned against the black sofa and looked at me with narrowed eyes. Do you like it? The man stepped forward, put his arm around my waist, and stared at the 2 of us in the mirror with me. He kissed my temple. You don't love to smile anymore, Annie. Water diamonds are attached to the layers of skirt, shining with brilliant light. He gently pinched my cheek. Too nervous? Don't be afraid. So the clerk left. For the remaining sets of wedding dresses, he helped me change into them. The man held me, resting his chin on my neck. Leaning over, he brushed aside the strands of hair by my ear. "Which one do you like?" I stood there in a daze, still not coming to my senses. Then he gently rubbed my head. "Forget it, take them all." Later, he took me to the amusement park again. It seemed that he wanted to make up for all our regrets in these few days. In high school, there was indeed a spring outing to the amusement park. But I had never been on these amusement facilities. At that time, I just watched those people from afar, looking at his figure chatting and laughing with Wendy. This time, he held me in his arms. The carousel gently swayed, bringing a drifting scenery. There was a couple on the adjacent seat, and they smiled very sweetly. "What are you looking at them for?" The man dropped a kiss on my neck and shoulder, and gently hooked my waist with a smile. "What they do, we can do too." When passing by the street in the park, a Quinn doll bumped in. After he gestured to us for a long time, I finally understood. We could take a photo with us and give us a balloon. In fact, neither Ryan nor I are the kind of people who will participate in social activities. But that day, for some reason, we were instigated by the Quinn doll to be together. Staring at the camera a little awkwardly. My eyes were flustered, but Ryan rarely showed a smile. The photographer took several pictures. I added the Quinn dolls. The photographer said that he would send us the developed photos later. Later, we went to take the Ferris wheel. When getting on the Ferris wheel, in fact, the sky had already turned cloudy. So when we reached the top, we didn't see a very good view. At that moment, I began to want to cry again. Who wants to be dejected all day? Who wants to be bullied until they can't lift their heads and still not fight back? However, I really have no way. Whenever I want to be positive, pain and disappointment will find me. I seem to have been walking in darkness all the time. Even the tenderness that Ryan bestowed on me like alms. I still think that it is the only light I can touch. We didn't go home until very late. So when my stomach growled, the man beside me chuckled a few times. He hooked my hair behind my ear and asked me, "What do you want to eat? I'll make it for you." This surprised me a bit. After all, young Master Ryan never touches the spring water with his 10 fingers. Perhaps it was because I stared for too long. He raised his eyebrows. "Don't believe me?" Waved at me. "Come, help me wash the scallions." What he meant by making it for me was just a bowl of noodles and an egg. But even so, he was extremely unfamiliar with it. At first glance, he had never been in the kitchen a few times. He didn't even know whether to add cold water first or later. I sighed, skillfully added seasonings, and then stirred the noodles. Rescued the egg that was almost fried into charcoal. He helplessly leaned on the countertop and smiled at me. "Surely things like this still need my wife to do it." With a little teasing, he deliberately emphasized the ending when saying the address. Finally, the two of us faced this bowl of noodles, which was considered a late-night snack. I didn't notice it just now. Looking out of the window at this moment, the pouring rain had become more and more intense. The warm lamp in the living room swayed, giving the noodles that didn't look very good a layer of vivid scenery. We fell into such silence again. The rustling sound of rain was like the noise of all things outside the window. I admit that when I think of that night later, I still think that everything before that second had shaken me. However, there is no if in life. The doorbell rang abruptly, waking both of us up. Urgent and intense, accompanied by knocking on the door. Ryan frowned after a second or two and got up to open the door. What came into view was the howling wind and rain. And a woman soaked through. "It's so late. What are you making a fuss about?" Ryan's voice was steady, but the woman opposite him was obviously emotional. It was Wendy. Her face was pale. But I don't know if it was on purpose or unintentionally. Her makeup was applied just right. Like a white lotus swaying precariously in the rain. Fragile and pitiful. "You." The woman sneered, opened her phone, and stared at him fixedly. "You sent these photos. Isn't it just to make me come to you?" Although there is some distance from them, I can still see roughly. The photo on the mobile phone is a photo of me and Ryan going out to play together today. He put it on the social platform. The man's eyebrows didn't loosen at all. Arms folded. You are mistaken, Miss Wendy. I'm just sharing my life. If there's nothing else, please leave. As he spoke, Ryan was about to close the door. The woman stuck a hand in and held onto the door frame. The two confronted each other in silence. I think Wendy's expression of being so pitiable. Probably any man would lose control when seeing it. Moreover, it's Ryan. Ryan who loves her so much. After a long silence, the woman took 2 steps back. Only then did I realize that she was crying. While crying, nodding. While speaking intermittently, okay, Ryan. You are such a jerk, so heartless. The heavy rain outside the door fell on the woman, but she seemed unaffected. You never post photos. Posting those. Isn't it just to make me come and show me? Want me to be jealous, right? At some point, Ryan's action of closing the door stopped. His eyes were pitch black and his expression couldn't be seen. Then I tell you now, yes. You succeeded. I'm jealous. I'm extremely jealous. As soon as I see you with other women, I feel uncomfortable all over. Yes. I love you. I still love you. Isn't this what you want to hear? Then I'll say it to you now, okay? I like you very much, you jerk. In these years abroad, I miss you all the time, Ryan, The woman's eyes were red, like a frightened rabbit. Not hysterical, but fragile and broken. She smiled, enunciating each word slowly. I don't know how to watch you be happy with others properly. Without you, where would I have the courage to live? As if making an important decision, she took 2 steps back and turned and walked into the heavy rain. It's my fault, Ryan. It's me who doesn't have the courage to love you anymore. You jerk. Live a good life. Wendy looked up and gave me a light glance. Her gaze then fell back on Ryan. In the next life, don't let this fool fall in love with you again. The door was suddenly opened forcefully. Dense raindrops poured into the room. The panicked leaves were torn apart by the wind. I watched Ryan chasing after her. I watched Wendy's stunned expression. I watched the pouring rain. Ryan stepped forward and blocked her lips. A nauseating feeling suddenly rose within me. I feel that I can't stay here anymore. What should I do? What should I do? Just watch the two of them kissing in the heavy rain? Or finally admit that I am worthless? Finally understand. Ryan, it turns out that he has never really regarded me as a human being. There is a backyard in the house. Without thinking, I left through the backyard. Suddenly I understood what it means to flee in panic. I don't want to appear in their sight. Don't want to see Wendy's triumphant smile. At that moment, her face will coincide with the person who once cut my back with a utility knife. Raindrops spin in my world. I finally know how worthless I am. My life has no meaning. Dad, Mom, Ryan, no one needs me. At this moment, the screen of the mobile phone tightly clutched in my hand flashed. I looked down. It was Quinn who took a group photo with us today. He sent me 2 photos. Me and Ryan were pressed together by Quinn. I was panicked and at a loss, while Ryan smiled slightly. Quinn added a sentence at the end, in the future, live a good life too. I stared at that photo. Rain blurred my eyes. Life. For me, it's like walking on the edge of a blade. Just when I wanted to grasp a ray of light, Ryan thrust a dagger into my heart mercilessly. Somehow, I replied to him, I can't live anymore. My life is meaningless. I stared at the vehicles coming and going on the driveway. Closed my eyes and rushed in. I say, little girl. What are you doing? Don't you know how dangerous it is? Crossing the road. How dangerous is it? What if you are really run over by the wheels? On the other side of the driveway with vehicles coming and going, I was squatting on the curb with an uncle. He raised his hand and wiped the raindrops on his face, and looked at me with his eyes raised. You? Alas, at your young age, what difficulties have you encountered? You can ask your family for help, or teachers, policemen, something. At the very least, you can come to me if there's no other way. Don't think about doing something stupid. There are many beautiful things in this world. I hugged my knees and listened to him keep chattering beside me. The plan to rush into the road and let the traffic take me away was not completed. The truck driver stepped on the brakes and pulled me to the side of the road to educate me. The raindrops splashed on the small puddles. In the end, he patted me on the shoulder. It's okay, little sister, I still have to deliver goods. I'll leave first. Remember, you have to smile. The man got into the truck and honked twice at me. The truck drove away slowly. I was still sitting on the stone steps. When I looked down, I found that there were more than 20 text messages in my phone. All were sent to me by that Quinn. It was after I sent that sentence, "I can't live anymore." The whole screen was full of words he sent to me. You can't not live. What are you thinking? After a long time, seeing that I didn't reply, he sent me another message. Can you please reply to me again? What happened? Can you reply? What's wrong with you? Are you still there? Hello? Hello? Don't ignore me, okay? Let me tell you a joke. One day, a crab accidentally bumped into a loach when going out. The loach was very angry and said, "Are you blind?" The crab said, "No, I am a crab." Ha ha ha, isn't it very funny? After some time, when I was being educated by the uncle, I still didn't reply to him. He began to ask me seriously, "If you are still there, do you mind telling me about your affairs? No matter what, the world is still very beautiful." I don't know what to say, but I am still waiting for you. The rain seemed to be getting lighter. I stood by the side of the road and finished reading his text messages. Obviously we didn't know each other at all, but he was willing to send me so many words. Perhaps, it's precisely because we don't know each other. I edited the message and sent it to him. I am too cowardly. And no one likes me. I don't deserve to live. Really, I don't deserve it. He replied to me almost instantly. Who said that? I like you. This is almost a random comforting lie. He then sent me a message. Besides, you still have your parents. Your parents also like you OVO. I replied to him. My mother went abroad when I was in elementary school. My father married an aunt back when I was in junior high school. After they had a daughter, my father often beat me. After these few sentences were sent, there was a long silence on the other side. Then, I saw him send me another message. I promise I will like you no matter what. If I lie, let me be struck by lightning. It feels like a very childish sentence. But as I looked at it, my eyes still became sour. I replied thank you to him. I stood up and staggered to find my destination. Suddenly, I realized one thing. Somehow, I couldn't speak to people anymore. The clerk with a smile suddenly became a big mouth full of blood in my eyes. The bright and soft lobby light emitted a moldy smell that was resistible. I couldn't take out my ID card from my pocket and couldn't communicate with people. As soon as I took a step forward, I would get stuck there. I began to be afraid to talk to people. Finally, I sat on a park bench. The auditory hallucinations began to worsen again. I then realized that I hadn't taken my medicine. But I didn't want to go back. I covered my head and endured the unbearable darkness of the night. I was like being roasted on a fire. Being tortured. Until the sun rises on a new day. Dawn breaks the early dawn. I know another day has passed. That's all. There is not much battery left on my phone. But at this time, a text message squeezes in. No one will send me a text message at this time until I see that Quinn avatar. He said to me, "Good morning. I like you very much this morning too. I think I will be amused by this text message." But subconsciously, I think he is a hideous monster like others. I stood up, went to the self-service machine to borrow a power bank and charged my phone. It seems that the city has cooled down after the rain. I stood on the street with my hands in my pockets. Everything in the early morning seems so gloomy. The figures walking in a hurry are without a trace. I sat at the door of the convenience store and sat from early morning until noon. I don't know what I should do or where I should go. At a certain moment, I feel that I am actually an empty shell and already dead. Am I still alive like this? My life is meaningless. The phone vibrated and another message came. I had spicy hot pot for lunch. Phew, it's so spicy. Did you have a good meal? Oh, by the way, I like you at noon too. I propped my forehead and looked at these text messages and felt a bit absurd. What, like or not, he is coaxing me like a child. So I replied to him. No need for this. I'm still alive and well. He skipped over my topic. Are you happy today? Not happy. I replied to him. Well, I know. He said, because in the eyes of the happiest people, happiness is also very rare. I think he should be a very happy person. He will never understand people like me. But later, he still insisted on sending me text messages constantly. Whether it's sharing or complaining about colleagues or saying that he likes me. He is always looking forward to my reply. After a long time, I realized that he was afraid that I would be gone. In those days, I really spent my time guarding my phone. When my eyes fell on the fruit knife in the convenience store, coincidentally, his message would pop up. Do you like berries? Today's berry puff is too sweet. I don't like sweet things, but I want you to try it. Because they say people who eat sweet things can be happy. When I walked by the lake and stared at the gurgling lake water, his photo would be sent. This barrier has been broken by naughty children. Will you not want the love of a bear with a missing ear? When staring at the phone. Even I didn't realize that sometimes I could curl up the corners of my mouth. But my dreams are always sad and short-lived. 3 days after I left, Ryan found me. I thought he would never find me again. Even if he found me, he would tell me that he wouldn't marry me anymore. However, as soon as he came up, he asked me to marry him. I frowned and looked at him. Marriage? Are you kidding me? Ryan. I can't marry you anymore. But his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse as he murmured my name. Annie, Annie, I'm sorry. It was my fault to kiss Wendy that day. Later, after thinking for a long time, I found that it is you that I like. After being with Wendy, I dream of you. I have been used to having you by my side. I can't forget you. I can't live without you. I stared at the man in front of me. He said he had been looking for me for a long time and was in a disheveled state. He said he was willing to compensate me for everything, his net worth, everything he had. He said that if I hated him, then I could strangle him to death with my own hands to vent my anger. However, it seemed as if there was a thorn stuck in my throat. It couldn't go up or down. I feel pain, nausea, disappointment, and anger. What does this mean? What does this mean? Has he ever regarded me as a human being from the beginning to the end? What am I? What are those knives stuck in my heart? That day, even I didn't expect it. I would raise my hand and slap him. The man endured it solidly without making a sound. His face turned to the other side and his expression couldn't be seen, but his voice was hoarse. Does it vent your anger? I shook my head and looked at him. I found that I was shaking. I was afraid. I was so afraid. I don't know why I'm so afraid. Why am I afraid even though it's not my fault? I just want to run quickly. I want to escape again. It's as if there are fierce beasts chasing me. I didn't look back and kept running backward. In my phone, there is a text message sent a minute ago. I said that there is a person I am very afraid of who has found me. He replied to me. Let's run away together. To the end of the world. I heard someone calling my name from behind. In Ryan's voice, there is an unprecedented panic and loss. He told me not to leave. He said I can't escape. But I didn't look back. Not at all. My meeting with Quinn is probably like meeting an online friend in person. When I saw her for the first time, she was inside a Quinn doll, so I always called her Quinn. She said she was waiting for me at the airport. In fact, when I went there, I had already made up my mind to run away. Because maybe it's okay on the phone. In reality, I am really too afraid to interact with people. Strangers, the opposite sex. Just these 2 words make my scalp tingle. But I don't want to go back to Ryan. I know that Ryan will find me soon. When I arrived at the airport, it seemed that there were people following me. I wandered aimlessly in the crowd, trying to shake off the people chasing me. Just when I was at a loss, suddenly a jade white hand reached out, pulled me to his side. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Let me take you away, okay? Gentle. A melodious voice. For a moment, I didn't react. Blinked once, then blinked again. Confirmed. In front of me is a girl with medium short hair, half a head taller than me. The person who was once inside the Quinn doll and has been comforting me on the internet, is a girl. Let's go this way. I'm familiar with this place. The girl held my wrist and led me through the crowd. She was wearing a baseball uniform and had a very cool outfit. She was really familiar with this place. She changed the flight and then took me away on another flight. So, when we were sitting on the plane, for a long time, I didn't react. As if to ease the slightly awkward atmosphere between us. She propped her chin and asked me, "Can you give me your phone?" I handed her my phone. Seeing me being so straightforward, instead, she laughed first. "Aren't you afraid that I will kidnap you?" I leaned against the back of the chair and said softly, "I have nothing left to lose." I always say some dispirited words uncontrollably. I thought she would be annoyed. But when she smiled, her eyelashes curved. "Ah, then just right. I have a lot of things that I can lose. I can share some with you. This season is just the peak tourist season for the Zhangqi Snow Mountain. There are quite a few people coming." I looked up and exhaled a white breath. Tightened my clothes. The clothes don't fit because this is Quinn's. Oh, by the way, her name is Quinn. I didn't bring enough clothes, so I can only wear hers first. She can ski, but I can't. She said that she will teach me first. But my mind can't keep up. When sliding down from above, I pulled her over. She just laughed, very happily, in the vast expanse of snow. "Annie, you can't even ski steadily yourself, but you still want to protect me?" I looked at her and said slowly, "You are nice to me, so I should also be nice to you." Haha, stupid. She looked up and simply looked at the blue sky. "Quinn, do you also think that I am very useless?" I turned my head and asked her. She stood up, took a few steps to stand in front of me, bent down and pinched my cheek. "How can you be useless? You are useful. You are the most useful in the world, you know?" My hair was tousled by her. "Don't think about those unnecessary things. Little stupid. There is a very popular scenic spot in Zhangqi Snow Mountain, which is the mountain post office. You can write a wish letter here and send it to yourself 10 years later. It is said that wishes will come true." Both Quinn and I wrote one. Actually, I don't believe in these things, but Quinn made me write. So I wrote, hoping that my depression can be cured. In fact, I know that although the snow on the high mountain is floating gracefully these days, but I am still not happy. I can't be happy. Some things are just forgotten. But people can't keep forgetting. Memories are like being pricked by a cotton needle towards the heart. Once remembered, it is an abyss of pain. That night, I secretly went outside the hotel without telling Quinn. There was a fine snow falling from the sky. I know that I can't drag Quinn down any longer. She is my good friend. A very good friend. I probably won't have such a good friend in my life. So, I can't let my depression haunt her. I want to say goodbye secretly. When walking outwards, I heard someone calling my name. I turned around. It was her. The evening wind was howling. She put her hands in her pockets and looked at me, approaching me step by step. Then she reached out and pushed me. That was the only time in my life that I saw her angry. For a long time. I thought she would scold me. She would be fierce to me. But she smiled at me. "If constantly escaping can make you happy, then let me keep escaping with you, okay?" Among the wind and snow in the mountain forest, I looked at her. I was full of bitterness and asked her why. She said, "I like you. Since someone liking you is the reason for you to live, then, let me like you." There are many amusement projects on the snow mountain. And it's quiet and no one disturbs. Quinn and I made the first snowman in my life. found the North Star by the mountain. She bought a notebook, which is cultural and creative. Then on the title page, she wrote my name stroke by stroke. That day, we were in the hotel, discussing tomorrow's hot spring plan. While discussing, suddenly she tilted her head and said to me, "Tomorrow will be better, right?" I was stunned and nodded subconsciously. She got out of bed and came in front of me. Her eyes are very beautiful. They are not very pure black, but amber with starlight. I call it hope. "Annie, what you have lost will definitely be made up for. Dad will apologize to you, and Mom will come back to you." I looked down and looked at her. She said that everything will be all right. This makes me hate myself even more. Extremely dejected self. Weak self. Not strong self. The snow outside the window is still falling rustlingly. The light in the room is off. I kept my eyes open until I felt her breathing become steady. I sat up. I really want to kill the cowardly self. I really want the emotions of sadness, greed and disappointment to disappear. In this way, when facing her, I am happy. I really want to show her my happy side, but I can't. I got up gently and then rummaged through her bag. She put away my mobile phone and didn't let me see the content inside. Today, I saw her frown at it. She said that things will get better, but is it really so? Turning on the mobile phone screen, the white light fell on my face. My dad called me more than a dozen times but I didn't answer. Ryan too. There is an unanswered call from someone I can't even imagine, and that is my mom. The text message my dad sent me is, "Why are you missing? I heard from General Manager Ryan that you ran away? You should have said earlier that your marriage partner is Ryan. After getting attached to a rich person, you don't want to tell your dad anymore, right? I tell you, now. Immediately. Come back and get this marriage done. Oh, by the way, give some of the betrothal gifts to your sister." Not much. It's just that your sister is going to study in the UK. You can support her until she graduates. Come back quickly and get married. Do you understand? Don't be naughty. There is another text message and multimedia message from a strange number sent by a woman. "Do you think you can take Ryan away from me? Hee hee, so what if I take him away? Sorry, he was once possessed by me. Let me show you some photos. Don't be angry." In the attached photos. They are all large-scale group photos of Ryan and Wendy. I flipped through the photos expressionlessly. Then, I read the last text message. It was sent to me by my mother. "Mom. God knows how long it has been since I last saw her. When I was young, the thing I looked forward to the most was her coming home. The thing I hoped for the most was that she would stop quarreling with Dad." I trembled as I opened the text message. There were only 2 lines. Very few. "Don't come looking for Mom anymore. Mom also has her own family." Outside the window, heavy snow was falling. When I came to my senses, tears had already pattered down on the screen. But what's the use of crying? Why can I only be sad? There is auditory hallucination again. A distant ballad is coming. It was when I was very young. When Mom and Dad were still together. They sang lullabies to me. Dad put me on his shoulder. Ran around in the small house and asked me if I was happy sitting on the small plane. Mom was smiling by the side and gently touched my head. At that time, it turns out that I was also their treasure. Today's snow is really falling so heavily. In the afternoon, there was a weather forecast saying that there is a risk of avalanche in the mountains. So the hotel had told us in advance not to go up the mountain. Quinn was still fast asleep. She didn't sleep well and kicked off the quilt, with her feet exposed. I looked at her with a wry smile and tucked the quilt in for her. Then I opened my own phone again and transferred all my money to her. Finally, I looked at her with downcast eyes. "Sorry, Quinn. Sure enough, I still think living is so tiring. The wind and snow on the mountain are really strong." I stepped on the snow with difficulty step by step. If I fell, I would get up and continue walking. I don't know where I am going. But I know that my destination is here. Dying from a fall on the mountain. Freezing to death in the wind and snow. killed by wild animals on the mountain. It doesn't matter which way, I can be liberated. I can finally be liberated. A life being washed over and over again in the quagmire. A life full of darkness. A life unable to see the light. I fell in the snow and looked at the night sky of this world for the last time. It's just that the wind and snow are too heavy and there is no North Star anymore. The North Star we found together. I closed my eyes. I don't know how long it has been. I heard someone calling my name. I didn't want to open my eyes, but it was her who was calling. But the ice and snow had fallen into my skin and I was already numb. Her hair brushed against my cheek and it was a little itchy. Annie, wake up. Don't sleep. Annie, we have to get out. I heard her hoarse voice. She is also a girl. How could she carry me? How could she find me? Why would she look for me? I cried on her back. Just crying like this, crying all the time. I suddenly realized that the place where our skins were touching was the only remaining warmth. Why did you look for me? Why did you save me? I am a useless person. Why save a person whose life has long lost its meaning? Annie, what is the world of a patient with depression like? Suddenly I heard her ask me. I hugged her tightly and said slowly. It is a silver gray. The snowflakes have gathered into wild beasts and are running towards us. The pine forest in the distance is the sea, and the clouds are hanging in the sky. Someone is singing on the mountain. What song? She asked me. Probably wanting me to stay awake. But I no longer had the strength to answer her. She stumbled. I fell into the snow with her. She ran over and hugged me tightly, dragging me along. Annie, Annie, wake up. I can sing too. It's a nursery rhyme. Shall I sing it for you? After singing, we will definitely be able to get out. Annie, listen to me sing, okay? Suddenly, a song rang out in the boundless snowfield. Carrying me on her back, her voice trembled terribly as she walked and sang. Snowflakes are falling on the white mountain. Falling on the tip of a girl's heart. There is light on the long road. Snowflakes, one by one. Gone. The cold wind was still howling. I stretched out my frozen and numb hand. Held her cuff. Human voices, running sounds, and the sounds of medical equipment. I heard someone crying loudly. Someone scolding. I opened my eyes. A woman threw herself beside my hospital bed. Annie, Annie, are you awake? It's good that you're okay. It's good that you're okay. The woman in front of me looked somewhat unfamiliar. It turned out to be my mother. I stared straight at her. My father rubbed his hands beside me. After holding back for a long time, only 3 words came out, I'm sorry. Then came my mother scolding my father again. Saying why didn't he find out about my depression earlier? When the two of them were arguing, I suddenly sat up and then ran out of the ward. I stumbled while running, and then I remembered and continued to run. Someone gave me a hand. What's wrong? Annie? It was? Ryan. He looked at me worriedly. I pushed him away abruptly. Probably frightened by my eyes. He was stunned there. But I didn't want to deal with these people. I just want to know. Want to know. I was rescued. What about Quinn? Quinn should also. This is the hospital closest to the snow-capped mountain. Plus, it was snowing heavily at night. Accidents occur frequently. There were search and rescue teams and doctors coming and going everywhere. The scene was a bit chaotic. I bumped into several sets of medical equipment. Finally, I grabbed a doctor. Anxiously asked him about the situation of the girl who was rescued with me. But he ignored me and went to take care of other patients. I anxiously looked around. Suddenly, I caught sight of a familiar ID card. At that moment, everything stopped. Light and shadow, human voices, ripples. I was stunned there. Looking. Just looking like this. The person being pushed out. Covered with a white cloth. Covering the face. As if at some point, there were noisy hallucinations coming from my ears. Sentence by sentence, so many. All were words she said to me. Annie, you can't even ski steadily yourself. Do you still want to protect me? How could it be useless? You are useful. You are the most useful in the world, you know? If constantly avoiding can make you happy, then let me keep avoiding with you, okay? I like you. Tomorrow will be better, right? Snowflakes are falling on the white mountain. Falling on the tip of a girl's heart. There is light on the long road. Snowflakes, one by one. Gone. Gone. Epilogue. General Manager Annie, congratulations on acquiring the Ryan family. On the road of future development, you can be said to have a bright future ahead. At the press conference, facing the constantly flashing lights, I kept a decent smile. Until suddenly someone interrupted the interview and asked such a question. It is rumored that the former president of the Ryan family, Ryan, and you were once husband and wife. Is there an element of personal grudge in this acquisition? Is the imprisonment of the president of the Ryan family related to you? For such gossipy questions from tabloids, I didn't have to answer originally. But this time, I straightened the microphone and spoke in a low voice. This acquisition is just a normal corporate merger. As for Mr. Ryan's imprisonment, I can only say that it is entirely due to his improper fund management and illegal activities. The flashlights flashed wildly at me. I answered several questions below fluently. After the press conference ended, I finally had time to take a sip of water. The secretary whispered beside me. These reporters, they take you for who knows what. I smiled. No matter who they take me for, I have reached this position now. By the way, where is Wendy? The secretary nodded and continued to report to me. As you requested, she was placed in a glass room where she can clearly see the press conference. She was very emotional for a while and even lost control of herself. But what can be done? She is just a psychopath now. This is what she deserves. None of us sympathize with her. I nodded at my watch on my wrist. Don't let her find an opportunity to commit suicide. After all, I am a person who repays kindness with kindness. I won't let her die. She must live well and live to see me reach the peak. The secretary accompanied me out of the hall. As if remembering something, she continued, "Oh, right. Do we still donate to the Hope Primary School? In the name of Miss Quinn?" When I heard this name, there is still an inevitable tenderness in my eyes. I nodded and told the driver that before returning to the company, I want to go back to my hometown. My hometown is the property of my father. He passed away several years ago. For the remaining property, his daughter didn't dare to compete with me at all. I idly propped my chin and looked at the scenery outside the window. At this time, the secretary beside me suddenly said, "President Annie, as of this year, the number of Hope Primary Schools you have donated to has exceeded 500. In fact, these funds have already accounted for most of your expenses, right? They all say you are very cruel and heartless. But I think you are a gentle person." The car stopped at the entrance of my hometown. I was looking through my mailbox. Hearing the secretary's words, I suddenly smiled. Finally, I found a different envelope in the mailbox. I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the mountain post office in Songchi Mountain has not closed down. In the letter are the words Quinn wrote to me on that day 10 years ago. Placed in the sun. Looking at the yellowed handwriting. The breeze blew, and the small flowers by the mailbox swayed. After a long time, I let out a long sigh. On that day, the words Quinn wrote to me 10 years ago were, "Now, you should be able to stand on your own. 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 Stand on your own."